The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 was one of the most pivotal moments of the 20th century. It didn't just symbolize the end of the Cold War, it marked the victory of freedom over oppression. You've probably seen iconic moments like Reagan's famous challenge,
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
or David Hasselhoff singing,
I've been looking for freedom.
What if I told you that one of the most significant events in world history happened because of a single slip-up, one that wasn't supposed to happen at all? A slip of the tongue by one man, Günter Schabowski, triggered the collapse of the Berlin Wall.
Das tritt nach meiner Kenntnis ist das sofort. Unverzüglich.
That one line changed history, but to understand how, we need to dive into the complex forces that were already at play. After World War II, Germany was divided into two nations. The West, supported by the US and its allies, embraced democracy and capitalism. The East, controlled by the Soviet Union, became a communist state under strict government control. In 1961, East Germany built the Berlin Wall to stop a flood of people fleeing to the West. It wasn't just a physical barrier, it was a symbol of repression, cutting off families, friends, and freedom. Life in East Germany was bleak. The government promised equality, but delivered repression, surveillance, and shortages of basic goods. The infamous Stasi, the state security force, kept the population under constant watch, creating an atmosphere of fear and mistrust. Yet, despite these barriers, the allure of freedom in the West was too strong for many to resist. People tried everything to escape, digging tunnels, flying in homemade balloons, and risking their lives to flee the regime. Still, the wall stood for nearly 30 years until cracks began to appear in the system. The wall wasn't just a German issue, it symbolized the broader ideological battle between democracy and communism. Every event surrounding the wall was closely watched by the superpowers of the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union. By the late 1980s, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev's policies of glasnost and perestroika were loosening the iron grip on Eastern Europe, sparking hope and unrest across the region. His policies of glasnost, which meant openness, and perestroika, restructuring, inspired a wave of change across the communist bloc. In East Germany, mass protests erupted demanding reform and freedom. The government was losing control. Weekly demonstrations, especially in Leipzig, grew larger by the day. By October 1989, over 70,000 people had taken to the streets. Faced with mounting pressure, the East German leadership scrambled for a solution. They needed to calm the unrest without dismantling their control entirely. Enter Günter Schabowski. On November 9, 1989, Schabowski, a senior official, was tasked with announcing a new set of travel regulations. The goal was to allow limited, controlled travel between East and West Germany. But Schabowski hadn't been properly briefed. He received the information just minutes before the press conference. When a journalist asked, "When do these new rules take effect?" Schabowski fumbled for an answer. Then, in a moment that would change history, he said, "As far as I know, effective immediately, without delay." Schabowski's words weren't just a slip, they were a bombshell. The press room buzzed with shock. Reporters scrambled to confirm, did he just say immediately? It was an accidental green light to the East German people. Schabowski had no idea that his words would soon spark chaos. Within hours, thousands of East Berliners gathered at the Berlin Wall demanding to be let through. The guards, confused and unprepared, didn't know what to do. Their orders were vague and the crowds were growing by the minute. At the Bornholmer Straße checkpoint, the officer in charge, Harald Jäger, found himself facing an impossible decision. Jäger had served at the wall for years, enforcing the very separation that now stood on the brink of collapse. That night, he wasn't just an officer, he became a reluctant decision-maker in history, faced with a choice between orders and the will of the people. Overwhelmed and with no clear instructions, Jäger made the bold move to open the gates. At 11:30 p.m., East Berliners began pouring through the checkpoints, greeted by the cheers of West Berliners on the other side. Within hours, the Berlin Wall, which had stood as a symbol of division for nearly 30 years, was obsolete. People climbed the wall, celebrating, hugging strangers, and even chipping off pieces of it as souvenirs. The sound of chisels hitting concrete, the sight of families embracing after decades of separation, and the overwhelming roar of freedom all unfolded in real time. The wall, once a stark symbol of division, was reduced to rubble, both literally and figuratively. A revolution had begun not through violence or grand political strategy, but through human error and the will of the people. The fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9, 1989 was as spontaneous as it was transformative. A simple mistake by one man, Günter Schabowski, opened the floodgates to freedom. This moment wasn't the result of careful planning, but of a people's pent-up desire for liberty and change. Schabowski's blunder reminds us that history is sometimes driven not by grand designs, but by the small, seemingly insignificant moments. And in those moments, the unstoppable force of human freedom can break through even the most imposing barriers. Sometimes, history is made by those who stumble into it, and Schabowski's slip of the tongue became a spark that changed the world. What's your take on how such a monumental change was triggered by a mistake? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to subscribe for more insights into the moments that change the course of history.